So, class, I welcome you back to another important lecture. And for today, we would begin with an entirely new chapter. And this new chapter, this is entitled as Excretion in Humans. And this word excretion is not something new when we started this course. So, over there, we have seen that this excretion is the basic characteristics of the living organisms, where we have the nutrition, the reproduction, the sensitivity, and the movement. So, we would have this excretion with us. So we would see that what this excretion actually means. So the situation is that in our body, you see that there would be happening of multiple chemical reactions, and those chemical reactions, when they happen inside of the cell, so they produce the waste materials. And these waste materials, they are entitled as the metabolic waste materials. And at the same time, there would be formation of some toxic waste materials. And usually these toxic waste materials, they are nitrogen containing. So that is why we call them as nitrogenous waste materials. And we can never forget that there is also the presence of some excessive materials in our body that we usually take in our diet. So whenever my body would try to remove these metabolic waste materials, the toxic waste materials, and excess materials from the diet, so this is what we call this process as the excretion process. Now, there would be this word metabolic that we have to be very much clear about. So when we try to be categorizing the metabolism, so this metabolism actually falls into two distinct categories. On one side, we have this catabolism with us, and then on the other way around, we have this anabolism coming up with us. So when we try to be saying metabolism, so you see that from the head to the tip of your toe, there would be the chemical reaction that are happening everywhere around in our body. So when we try to sum up all the chemical reaction that happens in us, so that would be the metabolism. And when we talk about the catabolism, so from the word cat, you have to be remembering a word, and that word is cut word. So you see that whenever I would try to break down the complex substances into the simple substances, so this would be termed as catabolism, and this catabolism would produce the waste materials in us, and these waste materials would be the catabolic waste materials, we say. And on the other way around, when we talk about the anabolism, so the anabolism is opposite of catabolism. Like whenever I would have the small molecules, and from these small molecules, whenever we would try to make or when we would try to synthesize the complex substances in our body, so this would be the anabolism with us. So catabolism and anabolism collectively they make the metabolism, and the metabolism would include all the chemical reaction that happens in our body all the time. And if I were to quote you some example of the anabolism, so you see that if I have this DNA molecule with me and if I were making this messenger RNA out of it, so we are making a big molecule from the small nucleotide. So this is anabolic chemical reaction happening. And when we talk about the catabolism, so you see that we would have this liver in our body, and in the liver there is a complex substance being stored, and this is referred to as the glycogen, which is a polysaccharide. So when we try to break it down into the glucose, so this would be the catabolism. Now we must know that where in our body the waste materials they are actually being produced. Now you see that within the cells we have this major organelle present, and this organelle is mitochondria, and we know this mitochondria is responsible for the respiration process, and we know that during the respiration this glucose and oxygen they would be catalyzed by this mitochondria, and as a result of that, not only we produce energy, but at the same time, we produce this major waste material, and that waste material is carbon dioxide gas, and we also produce some of the metabolic water. So this is something I don't want. The carbon dioxide is a waste material. This has to be removed. Now, moving onward, there is production of these nitrogenous waste materials, and these nitrogenous waste materials they are so called because they have the nitrogen element in them, and due to the presence of that element, they are entitled as nitrogenous waste materials. And among the nitrogenous waste materials, what we have with us, this is this urea coming up, then we will have this creatinine with us, and then at the end, we will have this uric acid with us. So we must be very much clear that how come this urea, creatinine, and the uric acid they are being produced inside of our body. Now, if I were to quickly tell you about the urea formation, so you see that whenever we eat the meat products or we eat the protein, so the protein when they come into the small intestines of our alimentary canal, so over there they would be broken down into the small molecules, and these small molecules they are the amino acids with us. Now, these amino acids they are carried to the liver first. Okay, like this is not the way that the time we have produced amino acids, so we would start delivering it to the cells of the body, but rather than I firstly have to be regulating the amount of the amino acids because usually we eat or we uptake more amino acid than they are required. Now, if this was glucose coming, excess glucose coming to the liver, so my body has a strategy to be converting it into the glycogen. But the excess amino acids, they cannot be stored. So what my body would do that they would try to be bringing about the breakdown of this amino acid. Okay, so the problem here is, like what I've said at the moment, so the problem here is that the body cannot store protein, so we are required to be removing the excess amino acids, and they are removed with the help of this fundamental process happening in the liver of our body, and this is what we entitle it as a deamination process, and this is frequently asked in your exam. Now, since we have to be removing the excess amino acid by the deamination, so I am quickly recalling the structure of the amino acid for you. So, our human body has total of 20 amino acids, and in those 20 amino acids, we would have this carbon coming up with us. There would be presence of this carboxylic group. There would be the presence of this amine group with us. There would be this hydrogen atom with us, and all the amino acids they are different from one another by having this different R group to what we entitle it as the variable R group we say. So the situation is that when from the excess amino acid, when we try to remove this amine group and this hydrogen atom, so this is what we refer to this as the deamination process. So when we remove this amine group and when we take off this hydrogen atom, so my body would produce this ammonia gas. And the problem with the ammonia gas is that this is highly toxic gas and this is highly soluble, so this can kill a person. So my body would take this ammonia into the urea cycle where the ammonia would be combined with the carbon dioxide gas and we will make urea out of it. Now, urea compared to ammonia is less toxic, but still we cannot afford that this keep on accumulating in us, so we are required to be removing it. So this is why we are in the need of the excretion process, or we need to take this urea out of the blood plasma. So when you are required to be writing the description of this deamination process, or if the examiner would say that you tell us that how come the excess amino acids they are removed, so you would say that they are as a result of the deamination and where this is taking place in the liver. And in that, the amine group that I have showed you above, so this would be removed from the excess amino acids, then we would end up making urea out of it. The urea would later diffuse out of the liver and then this would come in the blood plasma, and from the blood plasma we would take it to the excretory system which is responsible for this excretion process. Now this is how the urea we have formed, and this is one of the commonly asking MCQ that where the urea is produced, so you would never say the kidneys, you would say it is the liver. It is the kidneys that are filtering it out, but are the liver that is actually producing it by the deamination of the amino acids. Now, if I were to further go beyond into the discussion of the nitrogenous waste material, so we have this creatinine coming. Okay, the situation is that there is presence of some certain amino acids in our liver, and these amino acids they are modified in the liver, and when they would be modified, so my liver would make a compound out of it, and that compound would be creatine phosphate, and this creatine phosphate later is carried to the muscles where this would be allowing the formation of ATP. Like if I were to show you this situation, so you see that I have this muscle tissue with me, and when this muscle tissue would be contracting, so this would be using this ATP. And this ATP would be converted into ADP and phosphate, and now I again would like to reform this ATP. So what this creatine phosphate would do, it would say that okay ADP, now since you require this phosphate to be converted again into the ATP, so you take phosphate out of me because I have it with me. So this is how the creatine phosphate that we have made in the liver, so this is actually being utilized in the muscle tissues to be remaking or to be again making the ATP so that our muscles they keep on contracting. Now, the thing is that when this creatine phosphate would be broken down in the muscle, so we would make a nitrogenous waste material out of it. And this nitrogenous waste material is what we entitled it as the creatinine, we say. So, moving onward, the third nitrogenous waste material that we have got with us, so this is the uric acid. And you know that we have this biological molecule in our cells, the major molecule, and this is the deoxyribonucleic acid. And in the DNA, we know that there are nucleotides, and in the nucleotides, there is presence of the nitrogenous bases, and that includes the adenine, the thymine, the guanine, and the cytosine, and the stuff like that. So, by the breakdown of the nitrogenous bases of the DNA, we would end up making this nitrogenous waste material, and this is the uric acid with us. So, now I hope you would be clear that how come my body is making the urea by the deamination process in the liver, how come we are making the creatinine by the breakdown of the creatine phosphate in the muscles, and how come my body is making this uric acid by the breakdown of the nitrogenous bases that we have in the DNA. Now, the situation is that how should we remove them off? Okay. I forgot to mention one thing that not only these, yeah, like carbon dioxide and the nitrogenous waste material that I have talked about, now there are some of the excess materials coming into my body from the diet. And what I mean by that is that since we are eating the vegetables and the fruits and we would be taking more of the amino acid into the body, we are taking water in the diet, and that water would again be present in excess in some scenarios, and also the mineral salts that we say. Likewise, we have this liver with us, and in the liver, there is production of another waste material, and those waste materials we call them as the bile salts and the bile pigments. We say they not only have a role in the emulsification of the fat, but they are also the waste material. So I believe that now this has become clear that how come the different nitrogenous waste materials and excess waste materials now they are being produced in the body. So now we must discuss them that how we are required to be removing them off from the body. So now the situation is that here we have the tissues, and these tissues, by the respiration, they produce a carbon dioxide gas. A carbon dioxide gas, it would diffuse out of the cells or the tissues, and it would come into the blood plasma. Now, this blood plasma would take carbon dioxide containing blood toward the lungs, and when in the lungs the CO2 has come, so when we try to exhale the air out, so the carbon dioxide, most of it would be removed. So you see that we have gotten rid of this carbon dioxide gas simply by exhaling the air out. Now moving onward, since I have got these bile salts and the bile pigments coming, so they were originally being produced in the liver. And what the liver would do, it would take these bile salts and pigments through the gallbladder, and from there they would be carried to the duodenum of the small intestines, where they would be utilized in the emulsification of the fats. And how the body would be removing these bile salts and the bile pigments, like when we would be making the feces in the large intestine. So this bile salts and the bile pigments, they would be removed along with the feces. Okay, so we are done with like how come these bile salts and bile pigments my body is eliminating. Now the issue lies with what? The urea, the uric acid, the creatinine, the excess water that we have taken from the diet, the excess ions and the minerals and the vitamins and the stuff like that. So these waste materials or the excess and the nitrogenous waste materials, some of them they are removed in the sweating, and some of the water is also removed by the exhalation of the air out of the respiratory tract, but most of them they would still remain in the blood plasma. So we require the specialized system for removing them off, and that system is what we entitle this as an excretory system. So in the next class, we will see that how come the excretory system is designed, and how this would be adapted to be removing these waste materials out of the blood plasma so that they don't accumulate on the inside of the body, because if the accumulation would take place, then this could be life threatening. So this is something I don't want. So see you in the next class where we would see this excretory system and the process of the urine formation.